we left off where Jay Berry had caught all the monkeys there in the corn crib, resting and sleeping, and he went to check on them, and they were sound asleep still. That was a miserable night for me. I must have had a dozen dreams, good ones and bad ones. I dreamed that the corn crib was on fire and the monkeys were screaming for help. Then I dreamed that Jimbo had opened the door and all of the monkeys had gotten out. I could see them with their tails in the air running back to the river bottoms. I dreamed that I was riding a beautiful pony up and down the country roads and far back in the green, rugged hills, even way up in the clouds, riding. Once I fell out of bed and it scared me half to death. Along in the wee hours of morning, I fell asleep. The next thing I knew, I was awakened by Daisy poking me with that old crutch of hers. "Jay Berry," she said, "you better get up. Breakfast is almost ready and things are liable to start happening around here today." "All right," I said. "You don't have to poke a hole in me with that crutch. I'm getting up." I heard Daisy giggle as she left my room. When I walked into the kitchen, yawning and rubbing the sleep from my eyes, Mama looked at me and said, "Jay Berry, you look terrible. Your eyes are red and you look a little pale. Are you sick?" "No, Mama," I said. "I'm not sick. I dreamed all night and I didn't sleep very good." Papa and Daisy were already sitting at the table. Daisy said, "Mama, maybe you should make him stay in bed for 4 or 5 days and let me doctor him." "Oh, no, you won't," I said. "I'm not staying in bed and I don't need any doctoring. I've waited a long time for this day. I'm going after my pony and I don't want anything to mess that up." Papa said, "Wash your face in some cold water. That always helps. At least it'll wake you up." Our well water was as cold as a plow point in January. I poured some of it into the washpan and washed my face. It almost took my breath away, but I did feel a little bit better. While I was drying my face, I saw that Mama was dishing up some oatmeal for me. "Mama," I said, "I think I'll go check on the monkeys before I eat breakfast." "You won't have to do that," Papa said. "I took care of them while I was doing chores. I gave them a fresh pan of water and some more vegetables. They're doing just fine." I thanked Papa and sat down at the table. I was so nervous and excited about getting my pony, my oatmeal didn't even taste the same that morning. We had just about finished eating when all at once Rowdy came tearing out from under the porch, bawling his head off. Papa looked at Mama and said, "Must be somebody coming." "This early in the morning?" Mama said. "I wonder who it could be." "Listen, what's that?" Daisy said. Then we all heard it, the chugging of a motor. "Why, it sounds like a car," Papa said. "I think it is a car," Mama said. To see a car pass our home was just about as rare as seeing a white blackbird. I had seen very few of them up until then, and those I had seen had passed by in a cloud of dust. We hurried out to the porch. Rowdy was standing in the middle of the road with every hair on his back standing straight up and bawling for all he was worth. It was a car, but not like any that I had ever seen. It had one seat, and the back of it was nothing but a big box about 10 feet high and 10 feet long. The box was almost as wide as the road and was painted white and green. I heard Papa say, "It's a truck, but I've never seen one like that." "I haven't either," Mama said. "It looks like a house built in the back of a car." "I know what it is, Mama," Daisy said. "I've seen pictures of them. It's a circus truck." When I heard Daisy say that, a funny feeling came over me. My skin started crawling all around on my bones. Chugging and squeaking, the big truck wheezed up in front of our house and stopped. Rowdy must have thought the truck was a booger, and he didn't want it messing around our home. Growling and showing his teeth, he darted in and bit one of the tires. I heard Mama say in a low voice, "That crazy dog." On the side of the truck facing us was a picture of a huge gorilla fighting with a big snake. Above the picture, in a half-moon design, large red letters said, "Johnson Brothers Circus." 2 men got out of the truck and came over to us. One of them said, "Good morning." Papa nodded his head and said, "Morning." The man said, "I'm Ben Johnson. This is my brother Tom. We're looking for the Lee farm." "Well, you found it," Papa said. "I'm Bob Lee. This is my family, my wife, Sarah, my daughter, Daisy, and my boy, Jay Berry." The Johnson brothers were very polite. They took off their caps and nodded to Mama and Daisy. Then they shook hands with Papa and me. I had never shaken hands with a man before, and it gave me a wonderful feeling. I felt like I had grown about a foot straight up. Ben Johnson smiled and said, "So, you're Jay Barry. Your grandpa says that you have some monkeys for me." "Yes, sir," I said. "They're out in the corn crib." "Could we have a look at them?" Ben Johnson asked. "Sure," I said. It didn't take you fellas long to get here," Papa said. "When we got the telegram, we didn't lose any time," Tom Johnson said. "We jumped in our truck and drove all night." With Rowdy in the lead, we started for the barn. On the way, Ben Johnson explained how valuable the monkeys were to the circus. He said a circus just wasn't a circus without monkeys. When I opened the corn crib door, we saw Jimbo sitting on top of the corn eating an apple. The minute he saw Ben Johnson, he dropped the apple and started grunting as he hopped up and down on his short legs. Then he raised his long arms in the air and started towards us. He jumped from the corn crib door right into Ben Johnson's arms. Mr. Johnson wrapped his arms around Jimbo and buried his face in his fur. In a choking voice, he started telling him how happy he was to see him, how much he had missed him, and how much he loved him. Jimbo whimpered like a little puppy. I thought Mr. Johnson was going to cry. Mama said, "I didn't know that animals could have so much love for anybody." I looked at Daisy. She was leaning on that old crutch. There were tears in her eyes. Ben Johnson looked at his brother and said, "Tom, do you think you could back the truck up to the corn crib?" "Sure," Tom said. "That would be easy, but I don't know about getting through the gate. It looks a little narrow to me." "We can take out one of the panels of the rail fence," Papa said. "You'd have plenty of room then." "You wouldn't mind?" Ben Johnson said. "Nah," Papa said. "That's the one thing about rail fences. They're easy to tear down and easy to put back up." After the truck was backed up to the door, it was no trouble to load the little monkeys. Mr. Johnson locked the truck door, turned to me and said, "Well, Jay Barry, I guess it's payday." He reached in his back pocket and got his money pock. He opened it and took out the biggest wad of money I had ever seen. My eyes almost popped out of my head. "Let's see," he said. 2 times 28 is 56, and $100 for Jimbo. That comes to $156. Hopefully that's what you got when you did your math to try and figure it out. I held out both hands and stood speechless while he stacked the money into my trembling hands. In a voice choked with emotion, I thanked him, folded the money, and crammed it down in my pocket. I heard Daisy say in a low voice, "Mama, he's really going to be hard to get along with now that he's rich." Tom Johnson walked over to Papa with 4 small blue cards in his hand. "Mr. Lee, I'd like you and your family to have these," he said. "They're lifetime passes to our circus." Papa thanked him for the cards and said, "We're poor folks and don't get out of these hills very often, but next year when your circus comes to Tulsa, we'll be there." "You do that," Tom Johnson said. "Look me up and I'll see that you don't miss anything." Mama said, "Would you fellas like a cup of coffee or something to eat?" Ben Johnson turned to Mama. "Thanks, Mrs. Lee," he said. "We'd like that fine, but I'm afraid we don't have the time. We're in a terrible hurry. Our circus is leaving Tulsa for Arkansas tomorrow, and we have to be there." The Johnsons said goodbye to Mama and Daisy and shook hands with Papa and me. Then they got in their truck and took off down the road in a cloud of dust. As I stood there in our barn lot, watching the red truck disappear in the distance, a strange feeling came over me. I should have been very happy, but I wasn't. I felt a little sad and a little lonely. "There go the monkeys," I said. "I wonder if I'll ever see 'em again. I hope so, but even if I don't ever see 'em again, I know I'll never forget 'em. I'll always remember this as the summer of the monkeys." Papa said, "I don't think any of us will ever forget those monkeys." While still standing there, I thought of something. I ran my hand down in my pocket and pulled out the wad of money. I peeled off a $5 bill and a $1 bill. "Here, Daisy," I said, offering her the money. "I want to pay what I owe you." As if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, Daisy looked at the money and then at me. $6, Jay Barry," she said. "You don't owe me that much." "I know, but I want you to have it," I said. You feed the monkeys for me." Daisy took the money and smiled. Jayberry, you beat anything I've ever seen, she said. I can't figure you out. I should kiss you. Kiss me, I said as I backed up. No, you won't. You're not going to do anything like that. I don't want any girls kissing me. Mama and Papa were watching us. Papa laughed. Mama just stood there smiling. I've waited a long time for this day, I said. I'm going to see Grandpa right now. I'm going to get my pony. I don't think you'll have to be in that big of a hurry, do you, Mama said. Can't you wait until after dinner? I don't want any dinner, Mama. I don't want anything but that pony. Mama looked at me for a second, then she smiled and said, Well, I guess you've earned that right. Go ahead, get your grandpa to help you pick out a good pony. I will, Mama, I said. Chapter 17. Just as Rowdy and I started for Grandpa's store, Daisy yelled, Jayberry, if you're going to be running, you'd better be careful. You might lose that money. This scared me. Daisy was right. I ran my hand down in my pocket and took a firm grip on my money before I started running. I learned on that trip that it's not easy to run for 3 miles with one hand in your pocket, but I did it. Grandpa must have been looking for me because he was standing in the doorway when I came puffing up. When I saw you coming, I thought you'd lost an arm, he said. I couldn't see but one. I was afraid I might lose my money, Grandpa, I said, grinning, so I held on to it all the way. Oh, I see, Grandpa said. As we walked into the store, I said, Did you get those ponies, Grandpa? They're out in the barn lot, he said. 2 of them, a roan gelding and a paint mare. They've been broken and they're very gentle. As I stood there looking at my grandpa, I had a feeling that something was bothering him. He just wasn't acting normal. He was too serious. He didn't seem to be the least bit excited about the ponies. Thinking maybe I was just imagining things, I asked, Grandpa, how much is the pony going to cost me? He wants $100 for the roan, Grandpa said, and $75 for the paint. That's what the Indian wanted when I got there, and that's what he still wanted when I left. I've sworn 100 times that I wouldn't deal with that Cherokee anymore, and I mean it this time. I couldn't help grinning, for I knew that Grandpa didn't mean what he was saying. The truth of it was that he and Indian Tom were very good friends, unless they were making a deal for horses. Grandpa, will you help me pick my pony? Grandpa frowned. I've been thinking about that, he said. The way I look at it, this is your first pony, and I think you should pick the one you want all by yourself. I don't think you should have any help from me or anyone else. This will be something you will always remember, your first pony. I don't think you should share this with anyone. All right, Grandpa. I hope I don't pick the scrubbiest one. You won't have to worry about that, Grandpa said. They're both good ponies. I thanked Grandpa, and with Rowdy bouncing along at my side, I walked out to the barn lot. Before I opened the gate, I peeked through a crack and saw 2 of the most beautiful ponies I had ever seen. The ponies had heard us. They were standing with their heads raised and their ears pricked up, looking toward the gate. Horseflies were bothering them. They were stomping their feet and swishing their tails. Right off, I saw that the roan didn't stand as high as the paint. He was chunky and solid. His coat was so glossy it glistened in the sun. Rowdy, I said in a low voice, that roan is built for power. He could go all day and night and never get tired. The paint was almost too pretty. She was more white than black and more streamlined than the roan. The dark black patterns looked like they had been painted on her. Her legs were long and slim. She had a perfect head, small and dainty. Rowdy, that paint is built for speed. I'll bet she could run like the wind. I opened the gate, walked up close to the ponies, and stopped. What I knew about judging horses you could have put in a snuff can. All I had to go on was what they looked like. As far back as I could remember, in every dream I had had of owning my own pony, it had always been a beautiful paint. Not taking my eyes from the paint, I said, Rowdy, I won't have to look at that roan. I've always made up my mind. I want the paint. That's the pony for me. Rowdy seemed to realize that this was one of the biggest days of my life. He was so happy he was wiggling all over the place. To make the ponies move so I could see how they walked, I stomped my foot, clapped my hands, and shouted, Hey! in a loud voice. The roan snorted and bolted to the other side of the lot. The muscles in his legs and shoulders nodded and quivered as he ran. He was a beauty. The paint didn't move from her tracks. She just stood there with her head up, looking at us. I liked that. I didn't want my pony to be nervous and jumpy. I walked over to her and held out my hand. The paint wasn't the least bit nervous or scared. With her small ears pointing at me, she lowered her head. I felt her hot breath on my fingers as she nuzzled my hand. Then she raised her head and nibbled at the brim of my old straw hat. I noticed that her eyes were light brown, warm, and soft. I almost cried as I laid my face against her head. I've waited a long, long time for you, little girl. I said, now you're mine. I'll always be good to you. I backed up about 10 feet from the paint and snapped my fingers. Come on, little girl. I want to see you walk. She came to me willingly, but what I saw hurt me all over. She was limping on her right hind leg. What's the matter, little girl? I asked as I walked around to have a look at her leg. Do you have something in your hoof? When I knelt down, I saw why the pony was limping. My old heart dropped clear down to the bottom of my stomach. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. In the fetlock just above the hoof, my beautiful pony had a deep, raw, red wound. Flies and gnats were swarming around it. I jumped back and said, oh no! Not taking time to open the gate, I flew over the rail fence and ran to the store. Grandpa! I shouted as I darted through the door. That paint pony has a bad cut on its leg. Grandpa looked over his glasses at me. I know. That pony has a cut on its leg, he said. She got it caught in a barbed wire fence, but it's not as bad as you think. The tendon hasn't been hurt at all. With the right kind of doctor in, that pony will be as good as new in 4 or 5 weeks. 4 or 5 weeks? I exclaimed. Grandpa, I don't want to wait that long for a pony to ride. I want a pony I can ride right now. I want to ride at home. Well, what about the roan? Grandpa said. He's a good pony. He's just as good as the paint, maybe even better. He sure is a beauty, I said. But I wanted the paint. I've always wanted a paint pony. I don't want one that's crippled, though. Why don't you have another look at that roan? Grandpa said. You might change your mind. All right, I said, but I sure wanted that paint. With a heavy heart, I went back to the barn to look at the roan gelding. I must have walked around him at least 50 times. I liked everything I saw, but I just couldn't make up my mind. Something seemed to have gone out of my pony wanting. Every step I took, the paint followed, limping along beside me. Time after time, she would push me with her head. She nibbled at my clothes. Once she even nickered. She seemed to be begging me to take her. More disturbed than I'd ever been, I went back to the store to have another talk with Grandpa. Grandpa, I like that roan. I like him a lot, but I can't make up my mind. I just wish that paint wasn't a crippled. Well, I'd like to help you, Grandpa said, but I'm afraid I can't. You have to make up your own mind. Grandpa, are those the only 2 ponies Indian Tom had to sell? No, Grandpa said. Indian Tom had about 60 head he wanted to sell, all kinds. Horses, mules, ponies, and even a few donkeys. He did? Then how come you brought that crippled one home? Why didn't you bring one that wasn't a cripple? Well, I don't know, Grandpa said very seriously. You know, there's a reason behind everything. Maybe I felt sorry for that little mare. I feel sorry for anything that's crippled, don't you? Oh, sure, Grandpa, I said. I always feel sorry for crippled things. I really feel sorry for that little mare. She's so pretty, I'd take her in a minute, but I don't want to wait 4 or 5 weeks to ride her. Well, it's tough for anything to be crippled. Animals, humans, even little birds, Grandpa said. You know, a lot of cripples could be helped if someone would just take the time to help them. The way Grandpa kept talking about crippled things started me thinking that he wanted me to take that paint pony. Because I'd have done anything for my grandpa, even if it hurt me, I said, Grandpa, do you want me to take that paint? If you do, I'll take her, even if she is a cripple. No, no, Grandpa said, shaking his head. I'm not trying to make up your mind for you. I want you to do that. You pick the pony you want. I think I'll have another look at him, I said. I just wish that paint wasn't a cripple. I'd be riding her right now. Well, if you do make up your mind, Grandpa said, there's a halter hanging on the gate post. I thanked Grandpa and walked back to the barn lot with Rowdy. I took the halter from the gate post, opened the door, and stepped inside. The ponies were standing at the far end of the lot about 10 feet apart, and they were watching us. As I stood there with the halter in my hand, looking from one roan from the roan to the paint, and from the paint to the roan. I said, "Doggone it, Rowdy, I don't know which pony I want. If I take the roan, I know I'll never forget that little mare. If I take her, I'll have to wait before I can ride her. If I had enough